Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at some sources that, well, they force us into a really sobering space. We're putting today's headlines right up against some pretty timeless political wisdom.
It's necessary stuff, though. Important.
Definitely. Our mission today centers on the assassination of a figure like Charlie Kirk. But our focus isn't really the event itself.
Right, it's the aftermath. What happens next?
Exactly. We're diving deep into the book After the Shot, The Choice. It tries to make sense of this kind of modern fracture by looking back, way back, to the American founders, and maybe especially to Alexis de Tocqueville.
The French observer from the 1830s. Yeah.
And the book's core idea, it's pretty challenging. It says liberty isn't usually lost in some big, dramatic explosion.
No, it's more like it's surrendered. Bit by bit. Often when we start valuing comfort, convenience, more than courage or taking responsibility.
It's framed as a real wake-up call. The book itself was developed by James V. McNeely, published by AIntelligenZ Editions, and McNeely's background is key here, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He's not just approaching this theoretically. He's a Vietnam veteran, enlisted at 17, combat tours by 19.
Wow.
Yeah. So he saw firsthand how decisions made far away in Washington could really fail on the ground. That experience forged what he calls his lifelong conviction that liberty is both costly and fragile. You feel that weight in the analysis.
And there's this other layer, too, the AIntelligenZ Editions part. The book blends human experience with AI insight. We probably need to unpack that a bit.
We do. It's not just jargon. The AIntelligenZ component is described as like a powerful synthesis tool, almost a historical pattern matching engine.
So McNeely brings the human side, the moral context, the lived experience, the why people might lose faith.
Exactly. And the AI brings the scale. It scans massive amounts of data, modern political trends, social media behavior, digital patterns, and correlates it with the warnings from Tocqueville and the founders.
Okay, so if Tocqueville warned about the tyranny of the majority back then,
the AI might show how that same dynamic plays out now through, say, cancel culture. It could quantify the speed and spread of online shaming, map the behavior of digital mobs, basically confirming Tocqueville's fear with modern data.
Got it. So it's not replacing the classic wisdom, it's sharpening it, showing these aren't just 19th century problems, but maybe inherent democratic risks, just turbocharged by technology.
Precisely. The AI helps demonstrate that the small erosions Tocqueville worried about might have, well, grown into much bigger structural fractures today.
And the book argues the central fracture, the tipping point, is symbolized by that modern tragedy, assassination of Charlie Kirk. Now, Kirk in reality is a very polarizing figure. The source isn't trying to analyze the killing itself, right?
No, not the mechanics of it. The tragedy was the event. But the rupture, the thing that revealed the deeper problem, was the public reaction to Kirk's widow.
Because she offered forgiveness.
Yes, a message rooted in her faith. Mercy, forgiveness, these deeply held spiritual beliefs expressed in a moment of intense grief.
And that act, instead of being met with maybe quiet respect or even just silence, was mocked.
Savagely mocked, according to the source. Commentators, online mobs, calling her weak, naive, suggesting her faith was some kind of delusion stopping her from demanding, vengeance.
And McNeely argues that reaction revealed the real civic illness.
Yes. Where faith is despised, mercy is mocked, and violence speaks louder than conscience. That's the quote he uses. It suggests something fundamental has broken in the public square.
And the fact that Kirk was such a politically charged figure is crucial here, isn't it? We need to state this neutrally, as the source does. The reaction wasn't just about grief or lack thereof.
It became about political victory. Because he was so central to these heated debates, his death for some wasn't seen as a loss of a fellow citizen, but almost the silencing of an enemy.
Which points to what the author calls politics becoming a kind of counterfeit religion.
Exactly. When your political opponent isn't just wrong on policy, but seen as fundamentally evil or a threat to the nation's soul, then silencing them, even violently, might be met with indifference or worse.
And when someone tries to introduce a non-political value, like mercy,
that value itself gets attacked. It becomes another target for the mob that sees everything through a partisan lens. Forgiveness is seen as weakness because the counterfeit religion demands retribution, not reconciliation.
So that's our core question for this deep dive. Why the assassination? Yes, but more importantly, why was the response the mocking of mercy the real sign of fracture? The book says the answer lies in the crumbling of those pillars Tocqueville identified nearly 2 centuries ago.
Yeah, the argument is the foundations were already weak. The shot just revealed the cracks.
Okay, let's get into those foundations. First up, Tocqueville's warning about the power of public opinion, the tyranny of the majority. Sounds abstract, maybe.
But he saw it as incredibly insidious,
Yeah.
more so than old-style tyranny in a way.
Yeah.
Well, his fear was that in a democracy, the sheer weight of what most people think could become more absolute than any king. A monarch might throw you in jail, chain your body. But the majority, it chains your soul, he said, through ridicule, through isolation.
And he saw this in America in the 1830s, the land of the free.
It's pretty shocking, isn't it? His direct quote is something like, "I know of no country where there is less independence of mind and true freedom of discussion than in America."
That's counterintuitive, to say the least.
It is. He noticed people quickly learned to self-censor. They figured out that going against the grain, even on small things, could mean social ostracism, maybe even losing your livelihood. The pressure to conform was immense.
So you didn't need laws to shut people up. The fear of being the odd one out did the job. People learned to say only what will not provoke the crowd.
Exactly. And you see that echo today, don't you?
Yeah.
The digital ages just put that tyranny on steroids.
Right. Cancel culture, the online mob, is like Tocqueville's fear realized on a global, instantaneous scale.
And this is where that AIntelligenZ reflection comes in again. The AI could, theoretically, map just how fast and vicious these online shame campaigns are. What Tocqueville saw as maybe local social pressure is now global, permanent, searchable.
That constant threat, it forces a kind of preemptive self-censorship, doesn't it? People aren't just afraid to share controversial ideas. Sometimes they're afraid to even defend someone else who's under attack.
And the really sharp point McNeely makes, based on Tocqueville, is that the mob isn't just trying to correct what it sees as wrong. It wants to humiliate. It wants to mock virtue itself.
Like mocking mercy in the Kirk example.
Precisely. That's the shift from just disagreeing politically to attacking fundamental virtues. When things like compassion or forgiveness are framed as weakness, or when dissent is treated like treason, the whole moral fabric starts to fray. The only safe path seems to be conformity. Character becomes dangerous.
So freedom shrinks, not because the government passed a law, but because people internalize the fear. They police themselves.
Right. And the book's prescription is tough. It says we need to recover the courage to stand up to the sneer of the crowd. Defend someone's right to speak, even if you hate what they're saying, even if it costs you something socially.
That takes real character. Tocqueville thought that courage had to be exercised constantly, like a muscle.
Or it would atrophy. Laws protect your right to speak, but only character, individual character, protects your independence of mind.
Okay, let's shift gears. From the tyranny of opinion to another Tocqueville warning. The temptation of sameness. The paradox of false equality.
This one's tricky, because equality is so central to the American idea. Tocqueville saw this intense American passion for equality, ardent, insatiable, eternal, invincible, he called it. But he saw a danger, too.
What was the danger?
He warned that people might come to love equality so much they'd prefer being equal in slavery than unequal in freedom.
Wow. Choosing equality over liberty, that's the crux of it. The founders aimed for equality before the law, right? Same rules, same opportunities for everyone.
Yes, a level playing field to start. But the drift Tocqueville feared, and McNeely argues we're deep into now, is the demand for equal outcomes. Not just a fair race, but making sure everyone finishes at the exact same time.
Which sounds nice, maybe, less conflict, but what does that demand actually require from government?
It requires massive centralization. If you guarantee equal outcomes, you have to control everything that might lead to unequal outcomes. You regulate wealth, maybe redistribute it heavily. You regulate speech to make sure no one feels slighted or inferior. You might even flatten educational standards, aiming for uniformity over excellence.
And people start looking to government to ensure that uniformity, to manage their lives and feelings.
Yes, they run to the government as a sort of protective parent. And this leads directly to what Tocqueville called soft despotism.
Okay. So the demand for absolute equality fuels the growth of this smothering parental state.
Exactly. The state grows all-powerful, not necessarily through overt force, but through a vast web of rules and regulations designed to manage everything, ensure fairness, provide security. Tocqueville saw that extreme equality doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to this immense, gentle, but totalizing government control.
A government strong enough to enforce perfect equality is probably too strong to allow for real liberty.
That's the paradox. And it clashes directly with what the founders envisioned, doesn't it? That idea of a ruggedly independent citizenry. Think of Franklin's warning.
About trading essential liberty for temporary safety.
Right. Franklin saw that bargain was almost always a bad one, leading to losing both. And Jefferson believed the republic depended on the manners and spirit of a people, their willingness to be self-reliant, not on government tinkering to ensure no one rises above another.
The AIntelligenZ reflection in the book really emphasizes this distinction, doesn't it? Equality before the law as foundational versus government-enforced equality of outcome as suffocating.
It's crucial. One acknowledges equal human dignity. The other tries to erase human difference. And doing that requires levels of control and surveillance that are fundamentally incompatible with self-government.
Okay, let's pivot again to what Tocqueville saw as the moral anchor, the fragility of faith and community. This might surprise some people, coming from a French observer.
It was surprising. He didn't see religion as a state tool. Quite the opposite. He called it the first of their political institutions. Not because it dictated laws.
But because it shaped character, it restrained people.
Precisely. Liberty needs self-control. Tocqueville saw that religion, broadly speaking, trained people in virtues like forgiveness, humility, sacrifice, restraint. These are essential for self-government. If you can govern your own impulses, you need less external government coercion.
He made that stark claim. Despotism may be able to do without faith, but liberty cannot.
Right. Because despotism runs on fear and force. Liberty runs on shared values and voluntary self-restraint. The founders were right there with him. Washington called religion and morality indispensable supports. Adams famously said the Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people.
But how did they square that with religious freedom and separation of church and state? That's a tension we still grapple with.
It's a key distinction McNeely highlights in the source material. They weren't demanding a state church. They were demanding a moral culture. Laws can punish bad behavior, but they can't create good character. That comes from families, communities, churches, synagogues, voluntary associations. They guaranteed freedom of religion, believing that the moral teachings from various faiths would inform citizens' private actions, making them capable of the self-restraint needed for a republic.
So it wasn't about government enforcing faith, but about citizens practicing virtue, learned through faith or moral philosophy.
Exactly. But today, McNeely argues, as traditional faith declines, that moral vacuum gets filled by something else.
Politics. Politics as a counterfeit religion.
Yes, and that's dangerous. Politics starts demanding total loyalty, defining absolute good and evil in partisan terms, treating opponents not just as wrong, but as heretics. It divides the world into saints and damned based on political affiliation.
And political religion, unlike actual religion, usually lacks mechanisms for grace or forgiveness.
That's the point. It can only inflame, divide, demand purity, punish dissent. Which brings us back to the Kirk case study.
The mocking of mercy.
When the widow offered forgiveness, she was offering a transcendent value, something outside the political game, and the political religion reacted with scorn because forgiveness disrupts its narrative of righteous anger and vengeance. That moment showed how far the politicization of everything had gone. When mercy itself is mocked, the possibility of civic healing just disappears.
This ties into the next point, the erosion of local community. Tocqueville's idea of the vanishing township, the primary school of liberty.
This was a huge insight for him. He realized American strength wasn't primarily in Washington, D.C. It was local, in the towns, the counties. That's where people learned the habits of freedom.
By actually doing it, running local affairs.
Yes, debating local taxes, managing schools, figuring out road repairs with their neighbors. When you have to argue about a zoning variance with someone you see at the grocery store, you learn compromise. You learn to listen, even when you disagree. You learn to accept a decision you didn't want and still live together. That friction, that's the practical education in self-government.
Jefferson had a similar idea with his ward republics, didn't he? Small enough units where everyone could participate.
Make every citizen feel like they have a real stake, a real voice, making them the safest depository of their own rights, as he put it.
But today, those town halls, those school board meetings, they're often pretty empty, aren't they?
Sadly, yes. We tend to ignore local responsibilities. We don't know who's on the city commission, but we have very strong opinions about national figures we'll ever meet. We outsource the hard work.
And we yell at Washington instead.
Right. We become spectators in our own governance. We focus on the national drama, feel powerless, and then demand that distant officials fix everything. And naturally, when local engagement fades, central power grows to fill the void, It's a cycle.
The book brings in Edmund Burke's idea of the little platoons here. What are those?
They're the intermediate groups: churches, clubs, charities, civic associations, anything between the lone individual and the massive state.
And they're important because
They teach us to care about something bigger than ourselves, but smaller and more manageable than the nation. You learn loyalty to your community, your congregation, your volunteer group. Burke thought you learn to love your country by first loving your neighborhood, your platoon. They give us a sense of belonging and agency that big government can't provide.
And McNeely uses that Turning Point USA All-American halftime show as a modern example.
It's a fascinating example he points to. The Super Bowl halftime show is this huge, centralized cultural moment, right? Often pushing certain messages.
Messages that maybe don't resonate with everyone.
Exactly. So instead of just complaining or tuning out, this group used its own resources, its own network, its platoon, to create an alternative, a parallel cultural event reflecting different values.
So they weren't just consumers of culture, they became producers.
Yes, that's the Tocquevillian instinct, alive and well. The refusal to just passively accept what the center dictates. The impulse to organize, associate, and build something yourself. That habit of association is crucial. It's the first line of defense against becoming totally dependent on centralized power or culture.
Okay, one more cultural erosion, Tocqueville noted: materialism and the restless drive.
He was struck by how Americans were constantly striving, pursuing wealth with incredible energy. But he also saw they were rarely content, always anxious, clutch everything, hold nothing fast, he wrote. Chasing prosperity left them spiritually unfulfilled.
Why is that a danger to the Republic, specifically, just being focused on money?
Because when making money, or just being comfortable, becomes the absolute top priority, people might start trading away other things for it. Things like political independence or civic duty.
How does that trade happen?
Well, if the government offers economic security subsidies, bailouts, guarantees against risk, the person totally focused on material comfort might readily accept them. Even if accepting means giving the government more control over their lives or the economy, they become, as the book puts it, restless slaves to their appetites, more worried about their portfolio than their polling place.
This makes them easier to manage, easier to control by that central power we talked about.
Exactly. And the founders saw this risk too. Franklin saying, "Money never made a man happy." Adams believing wealth was just a tool for higher things like philosophy, like public service, not the goal itself.
Jefferson preferred the independent farmer, right? Less susceptible to corruption driven by greed.
Rooted in something real, not just chasing speculative wealth. The synthesis here is critical. Prosperity should serve liberty. It shouldn't become an idol for which liberty is sacrificed. A republic can't survive if its citizens value guaranteed comfort more than the difficult work of self-rule.
All right, let's shift from the cultural soil to the political structure itself. How power corrupts leaders and institutions. Starting with Tocqueville's, frankly, odd preference for less dazzling leaders. Virtue above charisma.
It seems counterintuitive today, doesn't it? We're drawn to charisma. But Tocqueville was wary. He actually admired the steadier, maybe more ordinary leaders of early America. He saw that as safer. He explicitly warned, "Men of great talents are rare, and I do not know if it is desirable to find them at the head of democratic states."
Why fear talented leaders?
Because democracies are suckers for spectacle. For the bold personality, the demagogue who tells the crowd exactly what it wants to hear, who promises easy answers, a brilliant, ambitious leader, especially one without strong moral grounding, can mesmerize the public into granting them dangerous amounts of power.
The entertainer who becomes a tyrant, it's a classic pattern.
It is. They win adoration first, then demand obedience. And the ultimate counterexample, the antidote, was Washington.
His greatness wasn't just winning the war, but giving up power.
Exactly. Stepping down after 2 terms. That act demonstrated that character specifically, restraint is the most important quality in a leader. More important than genius, more important than popularity.
But today, we live in an age of nonstop spectacle politics. Celebrity seems like a qualification. Campaigns are marketing blitzes. Voters act like fans.
And when we prioritize spectacle, we get performers, not necessarily statesmen. The book argues the solution is for us, the citizens, to change what we demand. Demand integrity. Demand restraint. Ask if leaders tell hard truths, even when unpopular. Ask if they serve principles beyond just winning the next news cycle. Because ultimately, the leaders we get reflect the character we value.
Okay, from leaders to the institutions they operate within. Courts, legislatures, the Constitution. McNeely emphasizes these are tools, not idols.
Right. The founders, like Madison and Hamilton, were clear. Federal power should be few and defined. They built checks and balances. They even acknowledged the people's right to resist if government overstepped.
Yeah.
Institutions are vital scaffolding, but they're only as strong as the civic virtue of the people participating in them.
McNeely points out a kind of dual mistake we make with institutions today.
Yeah, it's interesting. He says we either place this almost messianic faith in them, expecting government or the courts to solve every problem.
Which leads to dependency. That's soft despotism again.
Right. Or the other extreme. We grow completely cynical, despise the institutions, call them broken, and just give up on the slow, hard work of participating and reforming them.
And both extremes are damaging.
Both lead to liberty decaying. Blind faith invites overreach. Total cynicism clears the field for the power-hungry or the truly incompetent. Tocqueville saw this contrast. In America, then, people look sideways to their neighbors, their towns to solve problems. In France, they looked upward to Paris, to the bureaucracy.
Sideways fosters liberty. Upward fosters passivity.
That's the idea. The core lesson, backed up by the AIntelligenZ analysis of how bureaucracies tend to grow, is that institutions can't save a republic. If the people lose their moral compass or their willingness to engage, they become empty shells. Liberty has to be lived, practiced locally.
Which brings us full circle to that ultimate temptation, security, and how we incrementally surrender freedom for it. The full picture of soft despotism.
This is really Tocqueville's signature warning. Liberty isn't usually seized in a violent coup. It seeks away, often during crises justified by fear, by the desire for safety. He saw people willing to barter their freedom for comfort.
Let's nail down that soft despotism concept again. It's not like a harsh dictatorship.
No, not harsh. It's tutelary, like a guardian. It's absolute, minute, regular, provident, and mild. It doesn't brutalize, it manages. It doesn't crush your will. It gently guides it, shapes it, anticipates your needs.
Keeps people in perpetual childhood was the phrase.
Exactly. It provides for your safety, your health, your pleasures, manages your affairs, removes the burden of thinking for yourself, the anxiety of making difficult choices. It aims to spare you all trouble except the trouble of thinking and the pain of living.
And people might actually like that, or at least accept it.
Because it feels safe, it feels comfortable. You're free to pursue your private comforts, your material goals, while the state handles the big, messy public stuff. Tocqueville's image was unforgettable. A flock of timid and industrious animals of which the government is the shepherd.
And crises are the perfect excuse for the shepherd to tighten the fences.
Always. War, economic downturns, pandemics, civil unrest. Fear makes people willing to grant emergency powers. Franklin's question echoes through history. What liberty, once surrendered, is ever fully regained? And Madison knew this instinctively. The means of defense against foreign danger have been always the instruments of tyranny at home. Fear opens the door.
The book uses the Patriot Act after 9/11 as a prime example.
It fits perfectly. Born from real fear, real crisis. Passed almost unanimously. It gave the federal government huge new powers. Surveillance, detention, what was sold as temporary and exceptional.
Became normal, institutionalized.
Right. Every grant of power tends to become permanent. The bureaucracy built to wield it wants to keep wielding it. The danger isn't just the one-time surrender during crisis. It's the ongoing expectation that government should guarantee safety by regulating more and more of life.
So the price of freedom is constant vigilance, not just against enemies outside, but against our own desire for easy comfort and the government's willingness to provide it at the cost of our autonomy.
Safety without liberty is just comfortable submission. That's the hard truth.
Okay, so where do we go from here? McNeely, drawing on his veteran's perspective, brings it back to responsibility and renewal.
Yeah, he argues very strongly that responsibility is simply the price tag on freedom. Tocqueville saw it too. The health of a democratic society may be measured by the quality of functions performed by private citizens. Responsibility is the glue.
And the argument is that modern society is pretty good at dodging responsibility.
You see it arguably in massive debt, both personal and national, in relying on the state to handle issues that families or communities used to manage, in tuning out local government. And political rhetoric often feeds this, politicians promising to take care of everything. It encourages us to think we're just entitled to benefits without duties.
So the antidote isn't some grand new federal program.
No, it has to be personal, chosen, locally. Raising your kids well, looking out for your actual neighbors, showing up for that boring town meeting, serving on the school board, even when it's thankless. The republic gets stronger, not when we demand more from Washington, but when we demand more from ourselves. If we abandon our duties, the government will happily take them over, along with our freedoms.
McNeely includes that stark roll call of violence: JFK, MLK, RFK, Reagan, Scalia's attempts on Trump, Kirk. His point is that liberty's erosion isn't always quiet. Sometimes it's punctuated by gunfire.
Each of those moments tested the nation's character. They show what happens when political disagreement curdles into existential hatred, when violence seems like a legitimate tool. His own combat experience underlines that point. Freedom is never free. It's defended by courage, often paid for in blood.
And his final conclusion, informed by that AIntelligenZ analysis of social division, is that the biggest threat isn't external, it's internal. It's apathy. It's us losing our own virtue.
If we mock faith, if we ridicule mercy, if we choose comfort over responsibility, we basically prove Ben Franklin's fear correct. We had a republic, but we couldn't keep it.
To fight that apathy, the book offers that call to action handout. Specific, non-flashy things people can actually do.
Things that push us back towards those little platoons. It's about practicing virtue, not just demanding policy changes.
The list includes things like rebuild local connections, honor sacrifice, choose character over charisma in leaders, defend freedom of conscience even for those you disagree with, and consciously resist the lure of easy comfort if it costs liberty.
These aren't revolutionary acts in the dramatic sense. They're acts of civic restoration, rebuilding the foundations block by block. The future isn't secured by some sweeping policy document from D.C., but by millions of small, moral choices made every day in homes, communities, and town halls.
So we come back to where we started, the convergence of warnings. The founders needed a moral people. Tocqueville needed a self-governing people engaged locally. And enduring wisdom traditions, whether it's the Bible, Torah, Quran, Eastern philosophies, they all tend to call for justice, humility, and that crucial virtue, mercy.
And that AIntelligenZ reflection sums it up. Liberty dies when citizens act like mere consumers, when faith is openly mocked, when comfort becomes the highest god. It survives only when we consciously choose to rebuild responsibility and virtue, starting right where we are in our families and communities.
Which leads to the book's final, powerful takeaway. The Republic's future won't be decided by laws alone. It will be secured or lost in the soul of its people.
That puts the burden squarely back on us.
It does. The choice, after every crisis, every shot, is ours. Do we renew liberty with vigilance, with responsibility, with courage, or do we let it slip away for the illusion of safety and comfort? If we honor the sacrifices made for this republic by engaging actively, maybe it can endure. But if we squander that inheritance through apathy, well, we'll be the generation that lost it.
That's the challenge McNeely and Tocqueville leave us with, a deeply provocative thought.
What will your choice be?